So we're going to jump around a lot in movement 12, which we're calling final consummation. We're going to jump around a lot and try to make sense of this as we work our way through it. So we're going to draw a little bit. We're going to read a little bit. So what we want to do is we want to first ask the question. So we're on page 208, session 12. Notice here's our New Testament on the left. And as we finish page 208, the question I think that we have to rightly ask is, okay, we're experiencing new creation in this thing called the church, but we don't see God's justice ruling and reigning in the world. There still seems to be this thing called sin, and it still seems to have its tentacles in humanity. It's still crushing humans. We still see war. We still see injustice. We still see all of these things that are broken in our world. This seems as if we're still waiting. We are already experiencing the kingdom of Jesus, but there's a not yet that's still out there where all things are made right, where justice reigns, where righteousness reigns in the world. And as we look on page 208, that seems to be the question. We are experiencing Jesus as King, but we're looking for Jesus to return and establish that righteousness, that justice in the world, right here in this world. And what we're going to do as we build sort of theologically our understanding of session 12, the first thing we want to do is we're waiting for our Messiah to come. And what we're going to build is we're going to build some building blocks, and all of these things will hopefully help us to think logically, and then we'll try to put it in a chronology. So the first thing we want to note is we are not expecting Jesus to return in some metaphorical way. We're expecting Jesus to return to this world and establish justice. So we're anticipating a literal return. We're also anticipating that return to be a future return of our Messiah. The New Testament seems to build this picture out very, very clearly. If you'll turn with me to page 221, we will see this built out for us, this expectation. We begin with Matthew. In the Gospel of Matthew, this is in Passion Week. Jesus goes up to the Mount of Olives and he gives an extended teaching. We call it the Olivet Discourse. And one of the things he says is this. Notice it on page 221. We're looking at the second coming, the return, as I'm calling it here. Jesus says, "Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." Jesus is talking about this experience of pain and tribulation and what will happen at the end of that when the Son of Man is coming on the clouds. Now, we also see in Revelation, he is coming with the clouds and every eye will see him. Luke 17, the Son of Man in his day, when he returns, it'll be like lightning. It'll be obvious. Zechariah has clued us in. Remember, Zechariah is hyper obsessed with when is Yahweh going to return. And one of the things that we see is Zechariah will speak of Jesus' first coming when Jesus pronounces himself as Israel's king. And Zechariah will also speak of Jesus' second coming, we might say. They're fulfilled, both of those things are fulfilled as we look at Zechariah. One of those things we see is in Zechariah 14. On that day, when Yahweh comes, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two. It's his picture of the power of Yahweh when he comes. And then notice the idea. Yahweh will be king over the whole earth. On that day, there will be one Lord, and his name, the only name. Insight, look at page 221, the box. Characteristics of the second coming. It'll be sudden and unexpected. It'll be personal, we might say literal. It'll be visible. And just so we can see, Revelation 19 is the picture of Jesus' return. So we see Jesus returning in Revelation 19, and he comes with a robe that has been dipped in blood. There's debate as to whose blood. Is that his blood? Is that the blood of his judgment that he's executing? Here comes Jesus, and it's the symbolic language is speaking of this return, this future return of Jesus. And every Orthodox Christian holds to a future literal return of Jesus. Revelation 19 teaches it, and that's our first piece of the building block, a literal future return of Jesus. So we're going to come back to our chronology in a minute and put all this stuff in a timeline. But first, let's think, we're just thinking theologically, we're expecting a literal future return of Jesus.